Poverty, creating a fairer society. Our thesis says that we think poverty should be defined as lacking sufficient economic resources and access to basic needs. We believe that poverty should be measured by multiple factors, such as the SPM or supplemental poverty measure, along with some aspects of the capabilities approach, including bodily health, bodily integrity, and education. Further in the presentation, we will go more into detail about these measures.
What does the general public think about poverty? Some common answers to this question of what is poverty include that poverty is not having enough money. Some people get a little more specific and say that individuals in poverty do not have enough money to meet their basic needs. Others say that being in poverty is making less than 50% of the median annual income in an area. What do all of these statements have in common? They all deal with the aspect of not having enough money. Rector claims that the American poor is different than what is typically thought of as poor, which is being deprived of basic needs and economic resources. He believes that most poor Americans are not actually struggling to survive. He supports this claim with the fact that most Americans are able to pay their bills and put food on the table, as only 1.5% of households in the U.S. are unable to get sufficient food, and 6% are sometimes unable to get sufficient food. While poor American families may be meeting their basic needs and paying their bills, they're still often struggling to make ends meet and do not have the same standard of living as most Americans. American families can meet their basic needs and still be in poverty because they do not have the quality of life that is expected and required in the United States.
How is poverty measured right now in the United States? As of 2023, there are two ways in which the United States measures poverty. One of these ways is the OPM, or the official poverty measure. The OPM is calculated using gross annual pre-tax income and some cash benefits. Its threshold is set at 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet from 1963 and is only adjusted for family size and inflation. Only blood relatives are included as family when calculating this measure. It is used today as the main poverty measure in the United States, but it does have its flaws, most obviously its outdatedness. Because the poverty threshold has not been significantly changed since 1963, it fails to recognize the non-blood relatives in the home that are both contributing to income and using up resources. Additionally, the OPM excludes non-cash benefits and non-discretionary expenses, which affect the actual amount of money an individual or family is bringing in.
The United States also uses the SPM, which is the supplemental poverty measure. The supplemental poverty measure is also calculated using gross annual pre-tax income and cash benefits, but it also includes non-cash benefits like in-kind benefits including Medicaid and SNAP, and also near-cash benefits. The SPM also removes non-discretionary expenses such as taxes and medical out-of-pocket expenses, and ultimately calculates the poverty threshold using the FCSU, which is food, clothing, shelter, utilities, telephone, and internet. This is a more valid measure because it takes into account the actual resources at one's disposal based on the money they bring in, instead of including money they will be taxed on.
How can the measurement of poverty be changed? The SPM is a superior poverty measure compared to the OPM because it accounts for factors affecting the bottom line of a household. Opponents of the SPM argue that it can be difficult to compare different regions because the thresholds can vary by region. Even though that is the case, regions can still be compared by the percent of the population that is still in poverty, regardless of what the threshold is.
Since the SPM threshold is set at 83% of the median household expenditures on FCU multiplied by 1.2, it accounts for any additional basic needs that have not been initially accounted for. It is set at a point referring to the resources rather than the income.
Along with the SPM, we believe certain aspects of the capabilities approach should be included in a poverty measure as well. Capabilities are the set of valuable functionings that a person has effective access to. A person's capability represents the effective freedom of an individual to choose between different functioning combinations. Therefore, in our eyes, someone with a capabilities deprivation would be considered in poverty. Some people may argue that capabilities are very difficult to measure. However, certain capabilities can be more measured using functionings. For example, the capability of education can be measured by graduation rates, number of schools in an area, percentage of people who go to higher education, and etc. In this way, capabilities can be measured accurately. Also, others may argue that only choosing 3 capability measures does not paint the full picture. However, if this is supplemented with the SPM, our choices of capabilities provide the largest insight because they are the 3 we believe that most directly relate to poverty. Also, finding the true threshold of capabilities is not as important as recognizing and prioritizing the most deprived of capabilities.
So how will we choose to measure poverty? If we could, we would utilize a supplemental poverty measure and use a few capabilities from the capabilities approach, including bodily integrity, bodily health, and education. If the minimum basic needs threshold set by the SPM is not met, we would automatically consider this individual or family to be in poverty. If the SPM threshold is met, but at least 2 of these 3 capabilities are not met, the group, individual, family, etc., will be considered in poverty. Because capabilities cannot be directly measured, they can be determined based on measuring their functionings. Measures for education have previously been mentioned: graduation rates, rates of higher education, or access to education. Bodily health can be measured through many health metrics, such as birth rate, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, and other ways. Bodily integrity can be measured through safety of an area and access to proper resources in order to stay safe. For example, take 2 individuals. Individual 1 makes $40,000 a year and is able to meet all her basic needs. However, she lives in rural Texas, where the closest specialized hospital is 80 miles away, and she has not been able to receive proper education, so she cannot read past the 6th grade reading level. Individual 2 makes $40,000 a year and is able to meet his basic needs. But he lives in Dallas, Texas, where he has access to many hospitals and has received free education up through high school. If individual 1 sustains a heart attack, she will not be able to reach a hospital that could treat her for at least an hour. On the other hand, individual 2 would be able to get to a hospital within 15 minutes. It may not seem initially like individual 1 is in poverty because she is above the threshold in terms of income and resources. Rector, the SPM, and the OPM would consider her to be above the poverty line. However, these skeptics fail to account for poverty measures outside of income and resources, even though individuals can be stuck in poverty with sufficient income and resources because they do not have access to basic liberties or opportunities. Individual 1 is lacking sufficient education and bodily health capabilities, which we believe are basic liberties for humans, so she would be considered in poverty according to our measure, while individual 2 is not in poverty.
Although it is truly impossible to include every person that is struggling in one poverty measurement, we believe using the SPM supplemented with certain aspects of the capabilities approach will identify the people most at risk in order to get them the help they need.
Thank you.